You're not tired of being hurt. You're tired of pretending you're not. There's a difference. One is honest. The other is the lie that's destroying you from the inside out. And the worst part, you know it. You've always known it. You just didn't have permission to admit it. Until now. Let me guess something about you. You've spent years building this fortress around yourself, telling yourself you don't care what people think, that their words don't touch you, that you've evolved past needing validation, approval, connection. But late at night, when no one's watching, you replay conversations on loop. You rehearse what you should have said. You check your phone obsessively after sending that message, telling yourself you don't care if they respond, while your stomach knots itself, waiting for the notification that doesn't come. You delete entire paragraphs because nothing sounds right enough. You analyze every social interaction like a detective looking for evidence of rejection. You maintain this image of strength, of being unshakable, of having it all together, and it's exhausting. Here's what no one has had the courage to tell you. As long as you're trying to avoid pain, it will continue to control you. As long as you're numbing yourself, protecting yourself, performing strength, you'll remain a hostage to everything that happens around you, to the words that pierce you, to the actions that disappoint you, to the silences that kill you inside. And this isn't weakness. This is the reality for most people who feel too much, think too deeply, see too clearly. The only difference? Some people have better masks than others. Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds in depth psychology, said something that changes everything. We are not what happens to us, but what we choose to become. That's where the key lies, not in shielding yourself from the world, not in becoming cold, indifferent, or untouchable, but in integration, in bringing to light everything that currently destroys you in the dark. Because true strength isn't the absence of pain, it's the full awareness of who you are, even when you're bleeding, especially when you're bleeding. If you're still here, you're not like most people. Most people turn this off 30 seconds in because it made them uncomfortable. You stayed. That tells me something about you. This video is for you, the one who's exhausted from being hurt by everything and everyone. The one who feels you're always at an emotional disadvantage, as if other people have a power over you that you don't understand. I'm going to show you that it doesn't have to be this way, but for that, you'll have to face some truths that may hurt, and perhaps for the first time, this pain will set you free. Let's begin. You believe that what hurts you exists out there, in the person who criticized you at work, in the friend who didn't text back, in your partner's tone when they said, "I'm fine," in your parents' disapproval that still echoes decades later. You've built an entire narrative around how the world wounds you, how people are careless, how no one understands, how if only they would change, you'd finally have peace. But here's the brutal truth that's going to piss you off. None of this actually has the power to hurt you unless there's already an open wound inside you waiting for it. What hurts you isn't what others do to you. It's what these experiences activate within you. It's the story you tell yourself about it. It's the old trauma you've never addressed. It's the emptiness you disguise with productivity, with perfection, with that desperate need to seem well-adjusted when you're barely holding it together. Jung showed us something most people never grasp. The pain we feel in the face of the external world is merely a reflection of what hasn't yet been integrated into our internal world. That's why some people can be rejected and shrug it off, while you receive one slightly cold text and spend 3 hours dissecting what you did wrong. That's why someone can criticize their work and they improve it, while you receive feedback and hear, "You're not good enough." You never were. You never will be. It's not about what happens. It's about where it hits you. It's about which wound is still open, still bleeding, still screaming for attention you refuse to give it. And here comes an uncomfortable truth that's going to make you want to close this video. You still suffer so much because, on some level, you believe you can control how the world should treat you. You're still trying to be good enough, smart enough, strong enough, understanding enough, as if that guarantees no one will hurt you. as if you can earn immunity from pain through perfect behavior. You're performing constantly, hoping that if you get the performance just right, people will finally see your value and handle you with care. But control is an illusion. And as long as you cling to it, you live in constant tension, trying to predict the unpredictable, trying to avoid the inevitable, trying to manage everyone's perception of you while losing sight of who you actually are. Do you want to stop suffering? Then stop protecting yourself from suffering. I know that sounds insane, but stay with me. What you need isn't more control, it's more awareness. As long as you believe that people need to change for you to stop feeling pain, you'll remain enslaved by the actions of others. Your freedom begins the moment you understand that everything coming from outside only has power if it finds an echo within you. And this is exactly where the true battlefield lies. Not out there, but in here, in the unconscious, in the parts of yourself you don't want to see, don't want to know, don't want to admit exist. What you don't see masters you. What you don't understand controls you. What you refuse to face owns you. And this is what we're going to explore next. Get ready to dive one level deeper, because most people won't go here. But you're not most people. If this is already hitting differently, click the subscribe button. Your support means everything. The biggest lie you've been told is that you're in control of your life. You're not. At least not as long as you continue living on autopilot, reacting without knowing why, feeling without understanding where it comes from, making decisions that you later sabotage. Carl Jung made this devastatingly clear. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Read that again. Slower this time. Everything you think is just how you are, your triggers, your patterns, your inexplicable reactions, isn't personality. It's programming. It's the unconscious running the show while you watch from the audience, confused about why you keep doing things you swore you'd never do again. The pain that floods you out of nowhere, the anger that explodes when someone uses a certain tone, the sadness that invades you on random Tuesday afternoons for no apparent reason. None of this is random. These are messages from parts of you that have been forgotten, ignored, repressed, buried alive. Jung called this dark territory the unconscious, and it's not just some vague cloud of thoughts you can't quite access. It's an active force, an entire system of memories, traumas, desires, and fears that you don't want to face, but that continue to decide what you feel and how you act. You wonder why certain words destroy you while other people don't even blink. Because those words aren't just words to you, they're keys. They unlock doors to rooms inside you that you've kept locked for years, rooms filled with shame, with unworthiness, with the terrifying belief that you're fundamentally unlovable. And if those rooms are still locked, if those wounds are still raw, it's because you've never confronted them. You've only pushed them under the psychological rug, pretended they don't exist, told yourself you've moved on, but you haven't moved on. You've just gotten better at avoiding the trigger. Jung said, "We cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses." And what have you been doing? Judging yourself for feeling, repressing yourself for needing, silencing yourself for wanting, as if that would somehow make it all go away. The truth is that the unconscious doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. It doesn't fade because you pretend it's not there. It only finds more dangerous ways to manifest. In the toxic relationships you keep choosing, different faces, same wound. In the patterns of self-sabotage you cannot break. You get close to success, then mysteriously destroy it. In the anxieties and fears that arise precisely when everything seems to be going well, because deep down, you don't believe you deserve peace. This isn't bad luck. This isn't Mercury in retrograde. This isn't just how you are. This is your unconscious trying to wake you up, screaming at you through symptoms, through pain, through the repetition of patterns that keep bringing you to your knees. But you insist on sleeping. You insist on blaming external circumstances. You insist on believing that if you just find the right person, the right job, the right environment, everything will finally click. It won't. Do you want to be someone who's no longer hurt by everything? Then stop running away from what's inside you, because as long as you don't know you're unconscious, you'll be a puppet. And the more you try to protect yourself from external pain, the more vulnerable you become to internal pain. The more walls you build, the smaller your prison becomes. But here's what no one tells you about this process, and it's the reason most people quit before they ever reach freedom. There's a way out. But it's not in defending yourself. It's in integrating yourself, in becoming whole. Because becoming untouchable isn't an act of resistance. It's an act of deep, unflinching self-knowledge. And that's what we're going to explore next, what it truly means to be unshaken. Why this strength doesn't come from armor, but from acceptance. Why the people who seem most untouchable aren't the ones who feel nothing. They're the ones who felt everything and survived it. Stay with me, we're going deeper. Most people believe that the only way to avoid getting hurt is by closing themselves off. They build walls, create masks, develop emotional armor thick enough to survive a war, and pretend that nothing affects them. You know these people. Maybe you are one of them. They say, "I don't care anymore. I couldn't care less. Nothing gets to me. I'm over it. I'm fine." But watch them closely. Watch how they react when someone doesn't text back. Watch the tension in their jaw when someone questions their decision. Watch how they perform casual indifference while internally cataloging every slight, every perceived rejection, every moment they felt unseen. Inside, they continue to bleed. They keep corroding because the problem was never about feeling. The problem is not knowing what you're feeling and why. The problem is having emotions run your life while you pretend they don't exist. Jung was precise when he stated, "Know all the theories, master all the techniques, but when touching a human soul, be just another human soul." And that human soul you insist on hiding behind a strong, invulnerable, controlled character. It's screaming to be seen, to be heard, to be allowed to exist without shame. Here's what they don't teach you. Becoming emotionally strong has nothing to do with being cold. It has nothing to do with not caring. Nothing to do with ignoring pain, avoiding conflict, or pretending you're above it all. It has everything to do with integration, with acceptance, with bringing to light everything you've buried in the dark and saying, "This is me." All of it, the beautiful and the ugly, the noble and the shameful. And I'm done performing. You don't become untouchable by creating a barrier between yourself and the world. You become untouchable when you realize that no one can touch what has already been embraced within you. When you integrate your shadows, your jealousy, your rage, your neediness, your insecurity, you stop reacting to everything. You observe, you choose, you respond instead of reacting. You're no longer an emotional puppet dancing to everyone else's strings, and that is true freedom, not the absence of feeling, but the presence of choice. Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming who you really are, not what your parents wanted you to be, not what society expects, not what you think you should be to finally be accepted, loved, worthy, but what emerges from within, from the meeting of light and shadow, between ego and unconscious, between who you pretend to be and who you actually are. Individuation is not a process of perfection, Jung said, but of integration. You don't need to become a better person. You don't need to fix yourself. You don't need to eliminate your darkness or transcend your humanity. You just need to become whole, to stop fragmenting yourself into acceptable and unacceptable parts, to stop exiling pieces of yourself to win approval from people who don't even know you. And here's the secret no one told you, the one that changes everything. The more you run from pain, the more it chases you. The more you try not to be affected, the more fragile you become. The more you perform strength, the weaker you feel inside. But when you face your own wounds, when you look directly at your shame, your fear, your need, your rage, when you accept who you are with all that is broken and all that is powerful, nothing outside has the power to dismantle you. You may feel pain, but you don't shatter. You may be hurt, but you don't lose yourself. You may bleed, but you know exactly where the wound is and why it's there. However, this path requires something most people don't have: courage. Not the courage to fight, the courage to feel, not the courage to defend yourself, the courage to see yourself, really see yourself, without the filters, without the stories, without the excuses. Because it's precisely in pain that the key to transformation is hidden, in the thing you've been running from your entire life. And that's what we're going to unpack next. How suffering, far from being your enemy, can become the doorway to your true strength. How the thing you fear most is actually the thing that will set you free. Let's go deeper. And this time, no more hiding. You learned to hate pain since you were little. They taught you that suffering is weakness, that crying is embarrassing. That feeling too much makes you dramatic, unstable, too sensitive. So you learned to hide it, to swallow it, to smile through it, to say, "I'm fine," when you were dying inside. And the more you pushed it down, the more it consumed you. Because here's what they never told you. The more you flee from suffering, the more it chases you. And the worst part? It changes form. It disguises itself as anxiety that wakes you at 3 a.m., as anger that explodes over nothing, as numbness, that terrible gray feeling where nothing matters and everything feels pointless, as self-destructive impulses you don't even understand where they come from. Why do you sabotage good things? Why do you push people away right when they get close? Why do you start fights over nothing? Why do you can't let yourself be happy? Because ignored pain doesn't disappear. It just digs tunnels inside you until one day, without warning, everything collapses. Jung saw suffering in a completely different way than most people. He believed that pain was the messenger of the soul, the alarm of the unconscious, the language that your deeper self uses to get your attention when you refuse to listen any other way. He said something that haunted me when I first read it. Depression is like a lady in black. If she appears, don't push her away. Invite her to sit down, offer her a coffee, and listen to what she has to say. But you don't listen, do you? You silence yourself, distract yourself, scroll endlessly, keep yourself busy with anything, everything, just to avoid sitting with what you actually feel. You do everything to avoid looking at what really matters. What is this pain trying to show you? Because the truth that will break you open, is that suffering only hurts so much because you're still at war with yourself. There's a part of you that wants to grow, to evolve, to become who you're meant to be. And there's another part, the ego, the protector, the controller, that wants to keep everything exactly as it is, safe, predictable, known. There's something inside you crying out for transformation. But your ego, accustomed to control, tries to suffocate that call. It tells you, don't change. Change is dangerous. Stay small. Stay safe. Stay where people know how to love you. And it's in this friction that pain is born. Because change hurts. Growth hurts. Letting go of old beliefs that no longer serve you hurts. Cutting toxic ties, even when you know they're killing you, hurts. Allowing what no longer serves you to die hurts. All of this is mourning, an internal process of death and rebirth that happens inside you while the outside world sees nothing. But it's precisely in this space of ruin, when everything you thought you were crumbles, that something new can be born. Because when everything in you is deconstructed, when your certainties collapse, when pain lays bare your vulnerability and strips away every defense, you can finally see who you really are. Without the layers of protection, without the performance of strength, without the mask you've been wearing since childhood. And at that exact point, suffering becomes sacred. It brings you to your knees before the only thing that can actually set you free, yourself, your real self. Not the character you play, not the person you pretend to be, but who you are when no one's watching, when you have nothing left to prove, when you're too tired to lie anymore. Jung knew this. He understood that suffering isn't a failure of the system, It's part of the process. Pain isn't the end of the road. It's the beginning of the journey toward becoming whole. The problem is that most people give up before crossing that dark valley. They get to the edge, they see how deep it goes, and they turn back. They flee. They distract themselves. They return to the surface where it's safe and shallow, and nothing ever really changes. But not you. If you've made it this far, if you're still here, still listening, still willing to look at the things that most people run from, it's because you're ready to cross. You're ready to stop running, ready to stop pretending, ready to meet yourself in the dark and finally become free. And in the next part, we're going to understand how this crossing actually happens, how the path of individuation, no matter how lonely, how brutal, how terrifying it may seem, is what finally sets you free from the prison you've been living in. This is where it gets real. Stay with me. Few people have the courage to begin the journey of individuation, and even fewer have the courage to complete it. Because this path doesn't promise comfort, doesn't offer guarantees, doesn't protect your ego or validate your victimhood or tell you that everything you've done was justified. It destroys all of that. Jung referred to individuation as the process of becoming who you are. But this means, above all, unlearning what you think you are. And that hurts more than any rejection, any betrayal, any loss you've experienced from the outside world. Because you start to realize that much of what defined you until now was an illusion, a character, a performance designed to keep you safe, accepted, loved. You're not your achievements. You're not your trauma. You're not the victim in your story, nor the hero. You're not the strong one, the smart one, the understanding one. You're not the image you constructed to be loved, respected, or admired. All of this was what you created to survive, but surviving isn't living. And individuation is life's call beyond survival. It's when the unconscious begins to push everything that's been repressed, hidden, buried, distorted to the surface. All the rage you've been swallowing, all the need you've been denying, all the shame you've been carrying in secret. Individuation requires the dissolution of the persona, Jung wrote, for it is merely a mask of collective convenience. In other words, you'll need to tear off your own skin to discover what lies beneath. And let me be clear, this process is brutal. You'll question everything. You'll lose people. You'll realize that some relationships only worked because you were playing a role, and when you stop performing, there's nothing left. You'll see how much of your identity was built on being needed, being useful, being the one who understands, who forgives, who sacrifices. You'll recognize patterns you've repeated your entire life, always choosing emotionally unavailable people, always giving more than you receive, always waiting for someone to finally see your value without you having to prove it. And you'll have to grieve. Grieve the version of yourself you thought you'd become. Grieve the relationships you tried so hard to save. Grieve the time you spent pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. But it's in this process, this painful, lonely, devastating process, that you begin to become truly untouchable. Not because nothing affects you anymore, but because you've already gone through the fire. You've faced your monsters. You've looked into the eyes of your shame, your neediness, your rage, your fear, and said, "I see you, and you no longer control me." It's this internal clarity, this lucidity in the face of your own darkness, that gives you a strength that doesn't depend on approval, recognition, or control. You no longer need to be loved by everyone. You no longer need to win every argument. You no longer need to prove your worth. You no longer need to appear strong because you know, with absolute certainty, who you are. And no one can take that away from you. True emotional armor isn't a shell you build around yourself. It's a core you cultivate within yourself. It's the integration of all your parts, light and shadow, strength and vulnerability, wisdom and wounds, into a center of consciousness that remains unshaken in the face of storms. You may feel pain, but it doesn't break you. You may be hurt, but you don't lose yourself. You may stumble, but you don't shatter. Because you've stopped being reactive and have become whole. You've stopped living on the surface and have begun to inhabit the depths. However, this depth comes at a price: loneliness. Not because you'll be alone, but because few people can accompany you here. Most people are still trapped on the surface, in masks, in performances, in the fear of feeling, in the addiction to comfort. And when you begin to free yourself, you inevitably distance yourself from the life you knew. But here's the reframe that changes everything. You're not losing people. You're finally seeing who was never really there. You're not being abandoned. You're outgrowing the cage you built to keep yourself small enough to fit in. This distancing isn't rejection, it's maturation. You don't distance yourself out of pride or superiority. You distance yourself because you no longer fit where you once hid. Because the conversations that used to satisfy you now feel empty. Because you can't unsee what you've seen. And this brings us to the final truth, the one that ties everything together. Consciousness as your only true protection. Because it's not strength that shields you from pain. It's clarity. It's not armor that makes you untouchable. It's awareness. This is what we're going to explore in the last part. Consciousness as the only state in which nothing, absolutely nothing, has more power over you than you give it. We're at the edge now. Let's finish this crossing together. Now that you've made it this far, there's something that needs to be said with absolute clarity. Nothing, absolutely nothing, will shield you from suffering if you remain unconscious of what happens within you. The words will continue to destroy you. The rejections will continue to feel like death. The losses will keep bringing you to your knees until you wake up. An awakening isn't a magical event where everything suddenly makes sense and you're healed and whole and enlightened. It's a daily choice, a brutal, unglamorous, moment-by-moment choice to look within even when it hurts, to take responsibility for everything you feel, not because others don't contribute to your pain, but because you're the only one who can transform it. To stop blaming others, the past, your trauma, your circumstances, your bad luck, the universe, fate. Carl Jung said, "What you resist persists. What you accept transforms." You've spent your whole life resisting. Resisting the fear of not being enough, resisting the emptiness of rejection, resisting the pain of loneliness, resisting the anguish of not feeling seen, valued, chosen. But what did all that resistance get you? You hid. You silenced yourself. You tried to control everything. Your image, your emotions, other people's perceptions. You tried to be perfect enough that no one could criticize you. Strong enough that no one could hurt you, understanding enough that everyone would need you. And all of this has brought you here, exhausted, burnt out, tired of fighting against the world and against yourself. But now you know. True emotional immunity isn't hardness, it's clarity. It's not about creating armor, it's about expanding your awareness until you understand that everything that hurts you is showing you where you still need to heal. When you understand your triggers, really understand them, not just intellectually, but viscerally, they lose their power. When you see your patterns clearly, you can choose differently. When you know your wounds, you stop letting other people poke them and then calling it love. The actions of others lose the power to destroy you. You still feel. Of course you feel. You're human, not stone. But you don't drown. You don't lose yourself. You don't spiral for days over a text that never came. You feel it, you understand it, and you move through it. And that changes everything. What shields you isn't protecting yourself from life. It's diving into it so deeply that you understand it. It's not avoiding the waves, it's learning to swim. Those who live on the surface get hurt by any wave. They're tossed around, powerless, victims of circumstance. But those who dive know that there's silence down below. Stability. Power. A place where the storms on the surface can't reach you. And that's where you're headed. When you start to live from that place of integration, presence, awareness. The world may try to knock you down, but it no longer finds where to hit you. Not because you've built walls, but because there's no longer an open wound waiting to be touched. Because you've already seen it, felt it, accepted it, integrated it. What you don't see masters you. But what you've already faced, it becomes your power. Next time someone says something that would have destroyed you before, you'll pause, you'll feel it, and you'll ask, why did I believe them? Not, why did they say it? But why did I believe it? Because the answer lives in you, not them. And when you find that answer, when you see the wound, the old belief, the story you've been telling yourself, it loses its power. This is what it means to be untouchable. Not unfeeling, not cold, not defended, but aware. So aware that nothing can sneak past your consciousness and wreck you from the inside out. If this video touched something in you, if something within you has awakened, if you felt seen in a way you haven't felt in years, write in the comments, I choose awareness. Let's build a community of people who are done surviving by pretending to be strong, who are ready to actually live with truth, with depth, with the courage to feel everything and be broken open by it. Because that's where real strength lives, not in the armor, in the breaking, in the willingness to be human. The next video is crucial. It's not just part of the journey, it's the test. It reveals whether you're actually ready to change or just addicted to the idea of it. Whether you'll do the work or just consume more content and stay exactly where you are. Real transformation only begins when you don't stop at the first step. Don't make this another video you watch and forget. Don't let this become another moment where you saw the truth and chose comfort anyway. See you there.